got a quorum at this point?
I think we're good. I think you can go ahead and get started.
Okay then. So as I understand it, what you'd like is for me to cover the basics of doing school book fairs and, or rather, the education specialist training. I tend to have tunnel vision when it comes to schools business because I mainly do school book fairs. If I cover the basics, then so that the stuff that I would normally cover when I'm doing a school training with people in my group, then you can just decide for yourself about doing the certification bit. That would be you, Val, okay?
That's perfect.
And as long as everybody knows that Val would need to let the office know that you've done your schools training, and then you guys would be responsible for sending in the paperwork. Well, there's a code of ethics agreement that you're required to send in, and the office will just sit there happily on it until they've got both of those pieces of information in place. And so do remember to do your bit of it as well. Okay, so schools training. The main reason we put schools training in place was because such a lot of time was being spent trying to referee things where more than one person wanted to do a school and so on, and things were muddy, and nobody likes drama. No one involved likes drama. So we actually did it as much as anything to set out a clear bunch of ethical considerations, let's put it that way, and some practical help, because a lot of the time people would tread on each other's toes without meaning to at all, but just because they hadn't thought through the process of how to approach schools. So one of the first things I always cover with people is, to have realistic expectations about what sort of thing you're going to be doing with schools. You're not going to be taking huge orders from the school library or for class sets of this, that, and the other. You might occasionally get lucky that way, but that's not common. Most schools do not have a big budget for buying resources for their library. That's what school book fairs are for. They're wanting to earn free books to go into their school library and into their classrooms. So that really means school book fairs and also readathons. Now, I've done readathons, but I wouldn't say I'm a huge expert on them. They've gone okay. I had one that did really well. I had one that did less well. But one of the considerations between those two forms of business is that when you do a school book fair, it's usually repeatable. There's a school, in fact, the last school I did last week, I have done a book fair at that school every year for, I think, the last 21 years. And it's always a good book fair. And I know I can rely on that book fair every single first week of December, year by year. Now, if you do, I've heard of people doing spectacularly successful readathons. But consider it, if you do have a $5,000 or $6,000 readathon on your hands, the school will be getting $2,500 to $3,000 worth of books from you. That'll probably give them one of each of most of the books that they might want for their library. They will probably say, in my experience, they do say, oh, well, that's lovely. Call me in a few years and we might do this again. They're not going to do it every year, whereas with a school book fair, you're fulfilling a bunch of different functions for them, but principally, you are going to be able to keep on doing it year after year. They will top up with new titles, they'll replace titles that have got worn out through use, and so on. So that's why I concentrate on lit fairs. The other thing to bear in mind is, I look for business growth from my book fairs as well. I have made recruits at book fairs. I've booked parties at book fairs. I've booked other book fairs at book fairs because I get a chance to interact with the people as they come through the fair. With readathons, frankly, you don't get that one-on-one interaction with parents. And so it has more limited prospects for business growth, I have to say. Anyway, so those are the types of business that you can do with schools. And forgive me if I concentrate largely on school book fairs, because that's where I find that 80 or 90% of our school's business is, okay? And excuse clattering noises in the background, my family is serving themselves dinner, so just, hey, that's, it's real life here, guys. So let's see, right. Approaching a school is the first thing, and this is actually pretty crucial. When you approach a school, go into it with the right mindset. I do not want my schools to be lumping me mentally with the local Epicure consultant or Tupperware consultant or Sensi consultant. I want them thinking of me as the equivalent of their local Scholastic rep. I am a publisher's rep when I'm in that school. I am not the local party plan mum. That's actually very important, because some schools will have a policy in place that they don't allow fundraisers by anybody who's with party plan, because, you know, if they've got a mum in the school who does Sensi or whatever, then they're going to say, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? You're not allowing me in. I want them to be thinking of me as, you know, the main competition, the Scholastic, and increasingly we are very strong competition for Scholastic. I know that when people are working in an area where people aren't used to Usborne book fairs, you've got to get over that initial threshold to persuade them that they, you know, that Usborne's a viable alternative. We've got to the point in Calgary where, you know, the word of mouth about Usborne is really good, and I'd say we're mainly limited by how many consultants we've got to go out and do book fairs. Because of course you can only do one at a time. You've got to be physically there, and you've got to have a kit there, and not many people would have enough to split their kit between schools and trust volunteers to run it without them there, and so on. So realistically, because most school boards will do their parent-teacher interviews in the same time slot, maybe there might be a little bit of a spread, but generally it's going to be pretty similar when they're going to do it. And really the time to do a school book fair is during parent-teacher interviews. So I'll come back to that. So anyway, when you approach the school, you want to make a professional impression. So don't drift in with your child in a stroller. Make sure that you've got at least a passing acquaintance with the books and the paperwork, because when that librarian starts to ask you questions, you want to be able to give her reasonably well-informed answers. No, you don't need to have an encyclopedic knowledge of your local curriculum. But if the librarian says, well, do you carry much at a grade 2 reading level? You shouldn't have to go and dive into the catalogue and have to look that up. You should be able to say, well, actually, yes, our young reading series first level is perfect for grade 2, and so is our beginners series for the kids who are more into non-fiction. So, you know, a general reasonable product knowledge is important if you're going to make that good first impression. Now, the first thing you do before going into a school, realistically, what does a first contact with a school look like? Always ring first. Try and get an appointment to meet with the librarian. The librarian is always your first point of contact. Do not place any weight on a teacher or a parent or anybody else in that school telling you that, oh no, we haven't got an Usborne consultant. They don't know. And then this is where I always tell my horror story or near horror story, because it really illustrates this. I had a newer consultant call me and say, hey, I've just landed my first book fair. I'm so excited. This is brilliant. And I said, oh, fantastic. What school? And she named a school that I knew darned well was serviced. So I said to her, do you know what? I think there may be a problem there. I need to check with the person that I think is servicing that school. And she said, oh, no, it's okay. I spoke with the principal and he said they'd never had Usborne in there. They haven't got an Usborne rep. And so I said, well, but what did the librarian say? And she said, well, I didn't talk with the librarian, but the principal must know what's going on in his school, surely. So I called the consultant that I knew had serviced the school for the last several years and said, what's happening here? And she said, oh no, hang on, I'm telling it out of order. And this girl, the new girl, also said, Well, he's asked the principal has asked me to come into the school. They've got another company doing a book fair in 2 weeks' time in the parent-teacher interviews, and I can come along and set up alongside them and see how we go. Consultant, and yes, she was doing a book fair in 2 weeks' time, and it was her third book fair that she'd done with that school, and the principal was utterly oblivious that the person doing the book fair was, or the company doing the book fair was Usborne. So don't believe anybody other than the librarian. The librarian, in practical terms, may not be the person who will coordinate the book fair or even have the final say about who does the book fair, but at least she's a consistent first point of contact. Think of her as being the gatekeeper on the door, right? And she will know whether she's been approached by Usborne before or not, and will, if necessary, direct you to the right person to speak to, but she will know. This is so important. And so that will help you to avoid getting into any sort of conflicts with other Usborne consultants in the area. Always ask, are they already serviced? And always ask the librarian that, okay? Oh, I'm just going off track there. There was something else I was going to say about that. Oh, yes, I know. The other thing is that if there is any dispute about who is servicing a school, all of the discussion about it has to happen away from the school. The school should not be aware that there's any complication going on. The school's used to dealing with Scholastic, where there is one rep covering a large area and only one person to talk to. They should not have to be experts on how Usborne do business, okay? That this is for us to settle gracefully and amicably off scene. So as long as you do due diligence and check whether anybody else is servicing, you should be fine. It is not okay to do things like, if you're a parent at the school and there's another consultant that's been doing it, it is not okay to say to the librarian, but I'm a parent at the school, wouldn't you prefer to work with me? No, if there's somebody else already servicing the school and you say, well, that's wonderful, I'm glad you've got somebody, and I'd be happy to volunteer to help out at the book fair or whatever to support my school. But if somebody's servicing it, you have to respect that. Now, what do you say to the librarian when you approach her? I usually say, are you aware of the services that Usborne offers to schools? And that gets their interest. You're not saying, can I flog you a few books? You're saying, I've got services I can offer you. Are you interested? And then I run through, that we can do a school discount, frankly, the school discount on a school order, it's not much better than doing a party, right? A party order. So I don't make a big deal of that. But we do school book fairs and we do readathon fundraisers. Is that something that will be? And fundraiser, it's the book raiser, it's not a fundraiser. We do not give payout in cash. The benefits from an Usborne book fair are books, which is fine because we have the sort of books that the school actually wants in their library. I hear more and more these days that Scholastic does not have that. And so they do their Scholastic fairs. They've got all these credits to use, and there's nothing there that Scholastic's offering that they actually want to use their credits on. This is where we can benefit from that. So, okay. I would say to her, I would run through the programs that we offer, and this is where, if I'm doing actual school training and quizzing people, I ask people, what do you think is the single feature that makes our program stand out in comparison to Scholastic or whatever? And I get some growth. Well, yes, there's that for sure. Usborne's international reputation, the physical quality, the fact that the books will stand up to wear and tear, and they come up with a whole bunch of really good answers. They very rarely come up with the actual big hook, which is, we do all the work. All of these post school library techs, and it's mainly library techs you'll be working with, they all are getting their hours decreased and their workloading doesn't decrease along with it, they have no time for running these. And I'm hearing more and more that a lot of schools are having problems getting parent volunteers to help out with events. I think that more and more families are being, families where two parents are working and so on, and they're just not there. They're not available for helping out. So when you say, I will run the book fair, I will do it all, they sort of purr and get very excited about it. So that's the thing that will get their attention and at least give you a chance to talk a bit about it with them rather than just having the door slammed in your face. Okay, so then having talked with the library, well, you may need to talk with the office first before you can even talk to the librarian, because the first thing I would do is call the office and say, hi, I'm a representative for Usborne Publishing. I would love to speak to your school librarian. Could you, what's her name, please? I'd like to introduce myself. So I'll find out what her name is. I may also have to find out what hours she's working, because in practical terms, I need to call when she's actually in the library, and most of them are only half time and sometimes less. So I'll find out when my contact target is actually going to be available. Then I'll call during her hours and hopefully get a chance to chat with her and set up a time to go in and deliver a catalogue and show her some of our books. And I usually also give her a free book as a sweetener. It's always one of the beginners series, and I usually do, most curricula around the country will cover things like the needs of plants and animals and so on in their lower grades, in grade 1, 2, 3. So I would probably take something like tadpoles and frogs, or caterpillars and butterflies, or I might take something earth sciencey like volcanoes or whatever. So I'll take those books. They're only $6.95, $8.95 each. Well worth it as a goodwill gift to give to the librarian. This was something a librarian told me to do. She said, look, we've known each other for years, so I'm not being mercenary here, but if I can give you a tip, we all get loads of catalogues through the mail, and we get emails, and we get, in those days, faxes and so on. It's difficult for anything to stick out in my mind. So if you want me to remember you and stand out from the crowd, give me something that will impress me, and a little freebie. She said, this is not for me, this is for other librarians. That's how you're going to get their attention. And I have done that ever since, and I think it was a great and very well meant and constructive piece of advice from her, because people do remember, and they're always, schools love the beginner series. That is our flagship series for schools. They absolutely adore them. They're perfect first reference books and an introduction to using books for looking up information using a table of contents and an index and all that sort of thing. So they could not be better designed. So that gets me in to talk to the librarian. I hopefully get my school book fair booked up with her. Now, so once I've talked with the librarian, I can be considered as servicing the school. I've checked that nobody else is there. I have delivered a catalogue to her, usually in person, but maybe she wants to be more arm's length and says, well, I'll consider it, but I'm all booked up for this year. It would have to be sometime next year. Can you send me a catalogue? In which case, you can't force your way into the school. So then I mail her a catalogue. But you need to have talked with the librarian and established meaningful contact. Mailing off a whole load of catalogues without having spoken to anybody does not constitute servicing the school. You have to have explained the program and got her attention. Okay,
Carol, there's a
so
question.
that's the minimum. Yes.
There's a question in the chat.
Okay, let me just.
If you offer the book when you're doing your first meeting with the librarian.
Yes, because I want to make a good impression. I want to impress her with the book. So yes, when I meet her for the first time, I give her a gift. Yeah. I'm very easily distracted, and that doesn't mean don't ask questions, please. It just means please bear with me while I remember where the heck I was. Oh yes, so in order to be considered as servicing the school, then you need to have actually talked with somebody. In order to continue to be considered as servicing the school, you need to be in touch with them at least twice a year. If you go into a school and they say, well, yes, we've had an Usborne consultant, but I haven't heard from her in a while. If it's more than a year since they've heard from her, then I'm sorry, she's not doing due diligence and she is not servicing that school. I would say up to a year, because if I'm being honest, I only speak with my schools about once a year. Most of the schools that I service, I've been doing for many years. And so at the end of the book fair, it's kind of understood that I'll be back in that slot the following year. The relationship, the working relationship is there. So yeah, if you challenged me, I would say probably they don't hear from me much in between. But what I do is make sure that they get a new catalogue every year. You want to have a catalogue, go to them with your contact information on it and everything, so that if anybody does say, well, you know, have you heard from your consultant recently? Do you have this year's catalogue? Then yeah, that you're safeguarding your territory by doing that. So that gives you a chance to contact them mid-year, you know, in January, in middle of the school year, more or less. The other time that I would always contact them is in September, because it's been known for librarians to change schools in the middle of the summer. Sometimes they don't expect to be doing it. Maybe a position comes up that's closer to home and they just can't turn it down. Whatever, for whatever reason, they can be gone. And if there's a new librarian in September, they won't know you. They won't know their school is serviced. They may not know you've got a book fair booked with them for September or November or whatever. So do make sure that you touch base at the beginning of the school year. So as long as you've done that, you've spoken with them and you make contact twice a year, then you are safeguarding, you're doing your due diligence, you're doing your duty by the school, and you're safeguarding your territory. So I think that's it in terms of how to contact, who to contact, and how to sort of stake your claim on your school. And if you don't go through all that, if you don't stay in touch, well, it's your problem if somebody else moves in, basically. If you're doing a good job, you won't have any problems. Now, in terms of being prepared to do schools, realistically, you need to be able to get babysitting so that you're there through the whole process. And also you need to have a big enough kit to do it decently. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm now getting, oh, hi, it's the kitten. I've got packing paper all over the floor from sorting a book fair at the moment, actually, and the kitten's decided it's the best thing out. So there's lots of rustling going on in the background, but nothing dreadful. Okay, so doing book fairs. Usually they happen during parent-teacher interviews. This is ideal. You can do them at other times, but the reason that parent-teacher interviews work so well is that most parents come in for them, and it spaces out the traffic very nicely, because they're coming in, you know, every 15 minutes or whatever for interviews. You're never absolutely swamped or absolutely dead quiet, or rarely anyway. It feeds people through at a manageable pace. I've done things in conjunction with things like art evenings or science evenings or whatever. They usually don't work as well. People are there with a very different focus. They're there for a fairly short period of time, 2 hours or something, for a specific event. They go, they do the presentation, they look at what their children have done and so on. And then maybe at the end, there'll be a frantic 15 or 20 minute rush as people come to look at the book fair too before they go home. That can result in more people than you can handle, so that people see the lineup and drift away. And also they may be tired and ready to go home and, you know, have supper or get the kids to bed. It's just not the right focus, and it's too rushed. With book fairs, it paces it out for you so you can get a chance to interact with people and chat with people and talk with the kids about books and so on. So parent-teacher interviews, and in Calgary at least, that usually means a Thursday afternoon and evening and a Friday morning. So you do need to be available during times like that. I do usually try and do previews. And this is something where you need to get the expectations straight with your librarian as well. Previews are worth their weight in gold. Anybody who's ever been a teacher will tell you that parents don't read what you send home to them. They just don't. There'll be a few gems who do, yes, but in general, nope. So it doesn't matter how many notices go home, or whether there are emails going home or a newsletter or whatever. Those are secondary. The thing that will really get the parents into your book fair is having the kids aware of the book fair and drag the parents in. So previews are fantastic. Now, what's a preview? If you're not familiar with the whole idea, you would go and set up a day or two, or maybe even 2 or 3 days in advance, get your display all set up in the library, and then the kids come through class by class to have a look at the books on display. And they can make up wish lists. I usually do wish lists. Sometimes the school wants them to do wish lists. Other times the school will say, I'd rather that they were just looking at the books rather than worrying about writing things down. And that's fine, whatever. I don't think there's a big difference about whether they do wish lists or not. But anyway, they come through from like a 15-minute slot per class. The kids get a chance to see the books and get excited by the books. And it's your chance to also explain. I'm thinking that most of you, when you do your first book fair or your first few book fairs, will be doing it by taking orders. So you need to explain that to the kids, that it's, don't make it into a negative thing. Oh yes, sorry, you're going to have to wait for the books. We're only taking orders. I usually say, well, yes, you know what? It's like one of the Scholastic book orders, only you get to see the books first before you order them, and they come way faster. Because, you know, the Scholastic monthly orders take quite a while to come through. So yeah, you present it in a positive way that it's better than that because you get to see the books. And reassure them, and it'll only be, well, for me in Calgary, I usually say about 10 days to 2 weeks for the things to come in. They're usually in with us in under 10 days, but then it can take a while to sort out a $3,000-4,000 book fair. So, you need a day or two for that as well. So I say 10 days to 2 weeks. And that gives those of you who are back east, I'm so jealous because the turnaround is so much faster than it is for us, but it's manageable, it's doable. So you can get that sort of information over during previews. Now, I'm not usually there for previews, and this is where, making sure that you don't set or don't set a precedent that you're not going to want to live with, because I've been there and done that too. Given that Scholastic dump the books at the school on the Monday and pick them up on the Friday and don't do anything to help in between, you are going to look golden by comparison, whatever you do. So no, you do not want to be camped out at the school for the entire week, or you'll be paying yourself $2 an hour. So what I do is a typical one then. The last school I did, they follow the same model that they would do with a Scholastic book fair. So I set up on the Monday, they run previews on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. On the Thursday, I go in usually at about midday, and there's time in the afternoon for kids who've brought money in to come and shop themselves in the afternoon. That's usually a tiny, tiny portion of the book fair, but it's there for them if they want. And I can use the time, if it's quiet, to just tidy up the debris after the previews, things can get pretty messy and raucous after previews. Then I'm there throughout the interview periods when your customers really are the parents. The kids, the ones who are going to rope your customers in, but it's the parents who've got the money, okay? So it's the parents you need to see. You may well ask, you leave your books there, your lovely, precious, beloved books, and leave them to the mercy of the kids? Well, I make sure that the school is aware of the expectations. They know from Scholastic previews, Scholastic's not going to be happy if the books go back to them trashed, the unsold stock. So same thing, the kids know and the teachers know what the expectations are there. The librarian and the teacher I trust them to supervise the classes as they go through. My time is worth more than the odd one or two books that may not come back in pristine condition. Okay.
Carol, there's a couple more questions. There's a couple more questions in the chat.
How many books do you bring for a preview? That's exactly what I was about to come into. Books for a preview, damages. Yep, going to come to that too. No, schools don't actually give up gyms. I've never had, no, I've done one once in a gym. No, it's usually in the library. Gyms, probably not. They wouldn't do previews in a gym because usually the gyms are rented out to sports teams and things in the evening, and you're not going to be wanting to take down at the end of every day and reset up at the end of every day. It's usually in the library or in some other spare classroom area. So, no. Scholastic always do previews. They always deliver the stuff on the Monday. This is what schools are used to, okay? So I'm fitting in with the Scholastic model because that makes them happiest. So yes, I set up the entire book fair. Now, and I certainly don't want to be going back and changing locations or faffing around resetting up the book fair. There's, you know, my time is worth money. I'm not going to pour unlimited hours in. How many books? Right, well, that's exactly what I was coming to next. If you're going to be prepared, you've got to have a decent book fair kit. If you go in without a decent display, then what they're going to do is they're going to compare you with their last Scholastic book fair, and they're going to say, well, these guys may have nice books, but they're not bringing, this is a pathetic display. There's not enough here to show, and yeah, let's go back to Scholastic. So you're shooting yourself in the foot if you go in before you're ready. I have a document, I've got a couple of documents that I'm going to send to Val, and she can post them on your group page or wherever you need them to be, okay? One is my core kit for book fairs. It doesn't specify title by title, but it will say things like you should have at least 10 titles from each level of the Young Reading series. You should have at least 10 from the Beginners series. You should probably have all of the Beginners Plus series. So basically, it's about 200 titles that you should have. And that would not include titles, preschool titles, because they don't sell. The only time I've ever sold, you might think, well, maybe these, you know, maybe the parents also have younger preschoolers at home. But when they're at a book fair, they're principally thinking of buying something for the kids who are at that school. The people who will buy stuff for younger kids will be the teachers who've got little kids at home. But, you know, there's a limit to that as well. So I do take a few preschool books, but when I'm saying you need 200 titles, I mean you need 200 titles that are of interest to school-age kids. So what I'll do is I'll send the document that gives my top suggestions. So, you know, as I said, very rarely will I specify a particular title. I'll usually say at least one book about cats, at least one book about dogs. So the cats one could be The Cat's Beginner, or it could be Looking After Cats and Kittens. That series, by the way, the Looking After, boy, those are huge sellers at book fairs, particularly the cats and kittens and dogs and puppies, but also gerbils, hamsters, and all the rest of those. And the schools always want them for their library. Pets are a big topic, obviously, but I digress. So it's that sort of thing that I'll be saying, you know, at least one or two titles on astronomy, and so on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and leeway, but it gives you a framework of what you need to have there. You basically have to be thinking of two different sorts of books, right? Categories of books. There's going to be the books that will actually sell to the kids and generate the free book credits for the school. And then there's going to be the sort of books that the school will want for their library. There is an overlap, but the overlap would not include anything with stickers in or anything consumable or with tear out pages. Those might be the big sellers to the kids that will generate the free books, but they're not what the school is going to want. And then conversely, the school is going to want a whole load of the academic stuff, and reference stuff, which might sell rather more slowly to the kids. So you've got to have the range spread there. The other document I'm going to share with you, and I've nearly finished doing it. I've been compiling the data from all of my school book fairs this year. And so it's a list of top sellers. I mean, I've got no reason to filter the data. I'll put it all in. It'll be all of the books that I've sold at the 7 book fairs I've done so far this year. Well, that's it for this year, thank goodness. Christmas is coming. I need to start on some baking and stuff. But yeah, so you will see a huge contrast in sales. I mean, you know, between all of my book fairs, the top sellers I'll have got, you know, 15 or 20 copies of each of them sold over all of the fairs, not at one fair. Then there'll be a huge number of books where I've sold 1 copy between all of the fairs. And so that will give you a pretty good idea of where you should be prioritizing building your collection. Okay, now let me just deal with some more questions. Do the books get damaged easily on display? Well, this is why you need to have somebody supervising the previews, okay? So I'm reckoning that the teachers and also hopefully parent volunteers will be supervising the kids. Most schools have rules in place that they've trained the kids on, like do not lift flaps and do not place your wish list down on top of the cover of a book and then write on your wish list on top of using a book to press on, because little kids often press very hard and it'll track through and leave tracks on the cover. So, you know, you train them to move the book to one side and write on the, you know, on the table surface. Or the really organized schools will have the kids bring in their wish lists on clipboards. You supply a master copy of the wish list to the school, and then they photocopy it and distribute it or have it available there on the, you know, on the table during the previews. Some people, I must admit that I don't tend to put out a whole load of my Lift the Flap books during previews, because never mind how carefully you explain, there will be the child who will open all the flaps. But then also I've got 2 or 3 from each, you know, Lift the Flap series, which are basically sample copies, and I've got them out there with flaps lifted so that kids can explore them and see what they're like at the previews. Over the course of the year, they more than pay for themselves, because they then generate sales in the whole of the rest of that series. And every now and again, at the end of a fair, you'll get somebody saying, no, I want it now, I want my book now. And I'll say, well, you've got a choice then. You can either take this sample copy with the lifted flaps, or I'll order you a brand new one, in which case you do have to wait a bit. Which would you like? I don't discount them. I say it's your choice. You can take this one now, absolutely, or I can order you a new one. And you'd be surprised how often the answer is, well, my kid's going to lift all the flaps within 5 minutes anyway, so yes, I'll take this one now. What else? I've also heard people say that they put on removable stickers saying either sample copy, sample only, or whatever, so that they know that they will not get a copy that's had all the flaps lifted, or one that says, please do not lift flaps. You know, I explained to the kids, the person who buys this book will want to be the first one to lift the flaps. Have I ever done anything with Reading Week? Not every school does that. In fact, I don't think any of mine do, but it may be a province by province or area by area or even school thing. Oh no, yes, got distracted by the kitten. I did get back on track. I did tell you how many books are needed for a book fair. Library space is very small. Oh wow, you should see some of the places I've set up in, almost like broom closets. In fact, there was one I did at a little Montessori school where, yeah, it was done, you know, you had to breathe in to get around there. But if you choose your samples really well and make sure that what you've got are going to be really popular books that will generate sales for you, you don't need to have a huge spread out thing. But also, look at some of the, maybe I need to send some more stuff to Val. I'll work out the best way to share this stuff, but I got pictures of book fairs, and I often share the pictures of book fairs on Keep Calm as well as on my own team page, right? So lots of people share pictures of exhibits and book fairs and so on Keep Calm. It's a way of seeing, you know, getting different ideas about how things can be done. But for instance, my reading books, I get those plastic baskets. I see a plastic basket. Yes. These plastic baskets from the dollar store, and I just stick my books in, because there happen to be some books right behind my computer, like this, right? So people can just flick through and see them. So that takes up a very small footprint. I'm a great believer in the dollar store as a source for display items and so on. Yeah, you can do it in a small space. Trust me, I have done it. Yeah. So I don't saying that the school gym taking. I'm not sure whether you're saying about that the Scholastic Fair was being run at the same time as Usborne. I don't do book fairs at the same time as any other company. We don't have a rule about that, but Scholastic does actually. Scholastic has an exclusivity rule that says that they will not set up alongside any other company. Now, sometimes schools will try and bend the rules and hope that Scholastic doesn't find out, but we had a quite unpleasant incident at one point here in Calgary where the Scholastic rep went in and discovered Usborne set up as well and tore a strip up and down the librarian and gave her an ultimatum and said, if you ever do this again, Scholastic will not come back. You won't be able to get Scholastic again. Well, thankfully, the librarian took grave exception to the way she was being talked to and said, well, I guess that's your problem then. Looks like we're going with Usborne from now on. But it wasn't nice for anybody concerned. And I'm not sure whether at that point they had formalized the rule about not being prepared to be run alongside other companies, but they have now. So whether your librarian knows about that rule or not, have that in the back of your mind. But I wouldn't do it along with another company, or at least let's be accurate. I would maybe, if it was the only way I could get my foot in the door to convince them that we've got great stuff that people would want to buy, then maybe I would, just the once. But be prepared for the fact that your sales will be nothing like what they could be if you set up alongside another company. And in terms of, you know, can we compete with Scholastic that way? I can usually say to my schools, and I've proved it with a couple of new schools this fall, that our sales can equal what Scholastic does. And because I did 2 new schools this fall, and I asked the librarian in each case, you know, give me a clue about the level of stock I'm needing and so on. What are your sales usually with Scholastic? And they told me, and we matched it. And that was in a brand, you know, schools that were totally new to Usborne. So I'm very confident in that. The other thing about us is that we only sell books. Scholastic, they will tell you that half of the sales at a Scholastic book fair are of things other than books, pencils and posters and erasers and trinkets of one sort or another that have nothing to do with literacy whatsoever. And the rest of the stuff increasingly is weighted towards licensed marketed stuff, you know, Lego stuff and Star Wars and all of that type of thing. They used to do a lot more. And you know, sometimes if a school is experienced and insists, they can still get the more classic books and the good reading materials, but that's not really the case. So we can match the sales, and with us, everything that's bought is books, not toys. And that's a point of pride, and that's one of the things that gets us into schools these days. Well, you know what? Sometimes people do say that they get Usborne books through Scholastic, but have you seen how few Usborne books are in the Scholastic flyers these days? Not many. It used to be a bigger issue for us when Scholastic used to carry a lot of our stuff. I do not know why. but they are no longer carrying Usborne worth a darn. The other thing, of course, is I love to have a copy of a Scholastic edition of our books, because some of them, not all of them, but some of them are super tacky, and they fall apart because, there's a reason they sell our books cheaper than we do. They do their own print runs to their own print standards, and they are flimsy. The one that I often carry around with me is their version of one of the beginners, whereas ours is sewn and glued, and it's hardcover, and it's very durable. The Scholastic version that they had at one point was printed on this sort of almost magazine paper that the kids' magazines are printed on, and it was paperback, and it was just stapled, and the pages fall out. So the schools will tell you that they know that they're not paying for something that's going to last when they get Scholastic. And I don't want to, Scholastic has their niche, and they're fun, and I would never go into a school and say, you want to switch over and only do Usborne. What I'm trying to do is to say, you do 3 book fairs a year? Why not do 2 Scholastic and give Usborne a try in the other one? Try us out for once and see what we can do for you. And, if it doesn't go well, if you get poor feedback, fair enough. But how much of a risk are you taking just to do one of your book fairs with Usborne? And if you do a good job of it and make a good impression, librarians talk to each other. When I was doing one of those new schools this fall, the librarian said, can I take a picture of the setup? This looks gorgeous. We librarians in the Catholic board, we network with each other. And I'm thinking, I know you network with each other. Yes. So she was sharing it and saying, yes, this is a really good, viable alternative. And I'm hoping she will also have shared and said, yeah, do you know what? They matched our sales with Scholastic too. Because one of the things that you will hear come up is, oh, well, Usborne, they're expensive, aren't they? We really aren't much more expensive than most of what Scholastic sells. I always say to them, look, we've got books from $3.95 up. Probably about half our books are under $10 or $11. Yes, we do a few expensive books. At the top end of the range, we've got our $34.95s and so on. But that's a tiny percentage of the books. Yes, we've got some beautiful, expensive gift books, but the vast majority of the range is under about $12. Where was I then? Okay. Oh. Right, okay. Okay, thank you, Anita. You were disappointed with the Scholastic Book Fair. Yeah. Do you know what? I'm not going to go around blacking Scholastic to everybody. That's not what it's about. I'm giving you here in private some of the ammunition that you can use to answer questions, right? But as I said, what I'm looking for is just to get a toe in the door so that I can impress them. Okay, so running the fair, I think I've covered running the fair pretty much. Practicalities, the one thing the school really needs to do, and that is their responsibility and which you can't do, is the publicity for them. I usually supply them with posters, and we did at one point have school book fair posters, but they haven't reprinted those. So you might need to go back to what I used to do in the old days, which was to take a piece of Bristol board and cut up a couple of old catalogues and get cover spreads and so on and paste them on and do a collage, and that was jolly. And I laminated it, and then I could put a different sheet of information in the centre, and reuse it school after school. Use your imagination, or get something done up on Vistaprint or whatever. I think there may be some posters available at convention. I'm thinking, just a sec. Yeah. The wonderful Lisa Goodwin did up this. You may not be able to see it. I don't know. There we are. Oh, it's back to front, isn't it? But there we are. She got these printed up. They ended up $1 each, and if you laminate them, you can reuse them and reuse them. So that's you want posters. You want to make sure that you supply some blurb that they can put out in their newsletter, or do a whatever, use your imagination, but whatever method they use or they find most efficient for communicating with the kids, get that information out. But when it comes down to it, the previews are the best advertising you can do, because whether the parents have read anything at all that you've sent home or not, the kids will get excited about books and they will drag their parents in. Now, from there on, it's up to the quality of the books to sell themselves and up to you doing a good job with them. But you can't showcase the books. They can't sell themselves if the parents never come in the first place. So think of it as being the equivalent of hostess coaching. You've got to do a good job of making sure that everybody knows what's happening. Do I do a draw for the students to win a book or a dollar amount of books? I always do a free book draw. That's how I never do any event without doing a free book draw. Because if you don't do a draw, you are not getting the leads. There are always people who don't actually talk to you at the event or let on that they're interested in a party or whatever, and who still will say yes or maybe on those draw slips. It's a fact of life. Never mind how good a job you're doing of schmoozing and talking with people. There will be the shrinking violets who will only commit themselves to a little discreet tick on the draw slip. I used to do a specific draw. These days, I use the company's $100 book draw. That is so much more attention getting than anything that I could possibly offer. So I do the $100 book draw. I try not to let the kids enter for it. I want it to be the parents entering, because it's not getting me anywhere having the kids enter it. I'm not getting the point about the draw slips is that they ask the questions. The fact that they ask, are you interested in a party? Are you interested in the business? Even if you're busy, that gives the customer the prompt that we do parties, and yes, it's a home business. So you want to be using those. And I've got very strong opinions about which... always got strong opinions. You can disagree with them, but you can trust on me to have a strong opinion. I only use the official company draw slips, the ones that print out 3 to a page. The other two that are up there, and I have no idea who designed them, so I may be speaking out of turn and treading on toes, but one of them is extremely wordy. It's almost like a government census. Nobody is going to take time to fill that one in. And the other one is in bad English, and I'm not putting out anything that's in bad English, because especially in a school. So the one that was designed by the company has been tweaked and retweaked. It's written in coherent English, and it hits the, it hits the button on the main things that you need to ask. Any other questions there? So you take wish lists and payment at the actual fair. The wish lists are really works of fiction. They're more so than the stories. The kids will write down the most wild off-the-wall things that are totally unsuitable for them. The whole idea is to give the parents something to look at and bring them in, okay? You'll get the first graders who want the big $34.95 book about the Second World War, about the World Wars or whatever, or yeah. And the thing is, the parents will come in and they can make their choice as to whether they want to get things from the wish list or whatever. It's just to get them in, right? You take payment at the fair. Absolutely, you do. You first of all, it's harder to get in contact with people from, via a book fair. But secondly, I never do anything where I don't take the payment on the spot. The school is not going to want to administer collecting the money or handling any of the money. You're there to do the job, so they pay you upfront at the book fair. I accept Visa, MasterCard, cash or check, and these days e-transfer. I don't really use the Square, and that's a whole different discussion, but at a school in particular, there's no reason to be doing that, and the Square is slower than just I'm sorry, I've got one of the clunky, the credit card imprinters, and I'm way faster with that than I'm on the square. So I also have discovered that certainly within the CBE, some of the schools appear to be Faraday cages or something. There is no cell signal in there, so good luck. So I go for the old-fashioned, sure, tried and tested way. After all, you're ordering the books, and if the thing doesn't run, you can sort out payment before you deliver them the book, so they don't get the books. You absolutely have to accept Visa and MasterCard, or your sales are going to be down the tubes. I rarely lose a sale because of not being able to take debit. Usually they'll do e-transfer instead if they're absolutely determined. I very rarely get checks. I think out of all 5 of my book fairs that I've done this fall, I maybe took 3 or 4 checks. Again, if the check bounces, then they don't get the books. You've got the books. So you want to make sure that things clear before you deliver. But I very, very rarely get checks. People don't use them much these days. Okay, now let's see. Have I forgotten anything? So in terms of the logistics of it then, yeah, obviously I need to spell that out a little more clearly. So you take the orders at the fair. You use the triplicate forms as usual. You give them the pink one as a receipt, and then when the fare comes in, hang on, I'm going to see if I can stand up and show you what it looks like when you're sorting a book fair. I probably will screw this up, but there you are. See all of, oh no, that's not really working. You see all of those boxes? They've got the little plastic bags. Each bag is labelled with the child's name in one corner and the teacher's name in the other corner, and I organise them. When they come in, I sort it all out. I label, I organise by classroom, and so all they have to do is each teacher comes in and grabs the books for their class and takes them off and delivers to the kids. So yeah, so I then put in I'm sorry, my son is desperately trying to work out whether he can walk past without getting in camera. It's okay, dear. He's sneaked past there, which was not unobtrusive, David. It made me giggle. Anyway, yes, so I put the yellow slip in the bag with the order, as well as having it written on. I write on the outside of the bag purely for convenience and speed for the school, but there's always the order, the receipt slip inside as well, and then I've got the white copy for my own records. The bags, they will be available at convention. Years and years ago, I found a company here in Calgary, a manufacturing company, plastic bag manufacturer, and I paid to get the printing plate made up for the for the bags with the company logo on, and I get them run off here in Calgary. Now the thing is, you have to have, I think the minimum run is 5,000 bags. So I do this as a service to Calgary consultants, and people come and buy them 100 at a time from me. And you know, 5,000 will usually last us for somewhere between 6 months and a year between all of us. I do have to invest like $1,000 or something outlay initially, which I then slowly but surely get back, and I just sell them on at cost. It's about $20 per 100, and I mainly use them for book fairs or for exhibits where I really want to have something branded going out. I can have them available at convention if anybody wants to pre-order some from me. I'll take in a couple of crates, a couple of cases of plastic bags. I don't mail them. I'm sorry, they're heavy. The company that I get them from doesn't ship. So unfortunately, although I'd be more than happy for other people to use my, take advantage of the printing plate and get them printed off, they don't ship. You have to go and pick it up from them, and they're heavy. You don't want me. I mean, I'm not prepared to take the time to package and ship, and that's not my that's not the business I'm in. But also, the shipping on heavy, dense things like plastic bags, it would put the price up a whole load again. But if you're somewhere where there are a bunch of different consultants in a fairly compact area, then you might be able to club together and find a local plastic bag manufacturer. If you can't find that, it's not the end of the world. Use the white t-shirt bags that are available at Costco and print off a colourful insert or something to go in to publicize the company or the business or whatever. Put something branded inside the bag rather than on the bag. But yeah, let me know if you're coming to convention and you want 100 bags or something. But be aware that it'll really add to the weight in your suitcase when you go home, because they are not light. Anything else? Oh yeah, Sam, please email me. I'm not going to remember anything on here. So I know that Val's got my email. It's just carolcooper@shaw.ca, okay? So by all means, place orders with me, okay? Now then, I think that's covered most of the practicalities. So shoot away with some more questions. What have I not covered? And don't be shy about unmuting and just chatting to make sure that I notice what you're asking.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I have 2 questions. My first one is there a big difference? I was invited to a teacher convention, so it's everything from K to 12 for all of the 62 division. So do I have to find out if there was a consultant that was at the previous convention for this? Does it fall under the ethics rules? It's not a single school.
Yeah, it comes under the exhibit rules, okay? I do the teachers' conventions in Calgary. There's a Calgary one, and then there's one for the areas around Calgary. I always think of it as being the Calgary, the hole in the middle of the donut, and then the Palliser is the donut around it. There are various other conventions in Alberta, but I don't travel. They actually all happen over Family Day weekend, so there's only so many you can do, type of thing. So yes, I do those. It's perfectly legit to sell to any school and any teacher at a convention. What would not be okay would be to send a catalogue off to a school without checking if it's already serviced, and accept orders from schools that are being serviced by another consultant. But again, that doesn't often happen at teachers' conventions. One thing to be aware of with teachers' conventions is that the teachers aren't going there with a whole bunch of classroom funds to spend. They are buying for their own resources out of their own money. And the things that I find sell best there are stuff like, complete art ideas has to be the best seller at any teachers' convention, largely because so many teachers have got them and give brilliant word of mouth about them, and I see them coming along and dragging new teachers with them and saying, this is the one you can teach art for the next 10 years from this book.
Which one is that?
Complete art ideas.
Complete art ideas.
Yeah, that's always been my top seller at teachers' conventions. They love our art books, actually, in general. They love the step-by-step drawing. They love the doodle a day. Anyway, but they're spending for their own resources. So you're less likely to be selling things like, the medieval world and weather and climate change. Your school librarians will want those, but not the classroom teachers. And the other thing to remember about teachers' conventions is that teachers are parents and they will be shopping for their own kids. So I do take things like the That's Not My series, which also actually are popular with special needs teachers. A lot of the touchy-feely tactile stuff is of interest to that sort of demographic as well. So they're going to be shopping with their own money for their own personal resources, which skews the type of thing that you sell there. But no, you're not going to be getting orders from schools at teachers' conventions, so you're probably going to be safe enough with that.
Yeah, and it was the vice principal of the school division that invited me. And she said that it's teachers that would be buying like their own supplies kind of thing.
Yes.
So that kind of rolls into my second question. I have someone who wants to use her $250 teacher kind of for tax purposes money to buy some books.
Yep.
So could she do that through me, or does it have to be through if the school?
No, she can do that. She can do that through you. Look, teachers are people.
Yeah.
They are private citizens like the rest of us. They can, if they've got a friend or whatever who sells Usborne, then of course they can do a party with her or whatever. What you can't do if the school is serviced by somebody else is go in and do, say, a party in the school staff room. That would be a very grey area, right? Now she can do a party at home and invite all of her friends, but well, I don't know, actually the school staff room thing is sufficiently grey. I'm second guessing myself there if she's doing it as a private individual and her
she wanted to do like a direct sale, like that's
not an issue. That really isn't an issue at all. And that $250 for tax purposes, that's simply their own money. Okay, that's not school funds.
So just a general receipt will be fine for her.
They jolly well want.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything else? I know I've talked a lot. That must mean I've covered almost everything, but this is your chance to grill me on anything, right?
What about the box sets? Do you introduce the librarians to the box sets where the books aren't necessarily the hardcover books, but they'll get kind of more of a bang for their buck if you're competing with Scholastic?
Yeah, they probably, I show them, but I don't find that librarians go for those. They don't want paperbacks. They want durable hardcovers.
Yeah.
And they do tell me that the and really $7.95 or $8.95, that's really reasonable for a good, solid, durable little hardcover. And that's the Young Reading series is one of the things that most of my schools collect, all of those and all of the beginners series. And they tell me that those are some of the books they can't keep on their shelves, that they're always out, the young readers, and they love the little bookmark and everything about them. So yeah.
There is one question in the chat.
Have I experienced any common issues? That is so open-ended. I don't know. I think the answer is probably no. Do you have anything specific in mind that you're worried about?
Yeah, it was me. Can you hear me?
If that's you, Casey, I can't hear anything.
Okay.
I can hear her.
You are unmuted, but I'm hearing nothing. Maybe you need to just type a question in. If there's something specific concerning you, then just,
That's so weird.
I have a question about. Oh, go ahead.
Still thinking, actually. Common issues.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
I have a question about the EMT.
Jan appears to be talking, and I can't hear her either.
Oh no! Jeez.
What's going on? Type, people, type.
Okay.
That's so weird. I can hear everybody. Can you hear me, Carol?
Can you still hear me?
I mean, every school is different. I'll talk while people are trying to find a way to communicate here, but every school is different. I suppose the main issue I would have with any school is if they all disappear at the end of the book fair and leave me to pack everything up and cart it all out. That I object to. That is an issue. And then other schools, they'll all muck in and, everybody will help get things packed and find the custodian who often has a large flat. Obviously I've got a little trolley that I use to cart things in and out. My trolley is worth its weight in gold. But often the librarians have, the custodians have the equivalent of a door on wheels that they, great big flat thing. That's brilliant because you can get everything in and out in one go. Wondering in regards to issues with parents. Well, I suppose that if you're, okay, things about parents, the only time I get issues with parents are usually at things like, Christian schools and Catholic schools. You have to be sensitive to check what is okay to display and what isn't okay to display. Oh, I know a common issue. Don't put the Facts of Life books out at previews. Don't do it. You will end up with a giggling knot of third grade boys or whatever, all going crazy about the boobs page or the willy page or whatever. Just don't go there, okay? They are brilliant. I sell loads of them, but I display them only during the parent purchasing time. And, again, the word is out about those. Lots of people come and ask and say, I gather you do a really good Facts of Life book. And I tend not to carry the growing up books because they're generally too sophisticated for an elementary school audience. And elementary schools are basically what I do. I have done middle schools, junior highs, grade 6 to 9 or whatever. They, even with the best planning and execution, you probably won't go much over $500. They're barely worthwhile. I think my theory at least is that with kids of that age, they associate book fairs with elementary schools, and it's not cool to go to a book fair. So they don't go to the book fair, or they look bored or whatever, but there may be a load of stuff there that's appropriate for. I don't find that it's time effective to do the older schools, okay? But anyway, growing up is too sophisticated for that demographic, and you're likely to get irate parents saying, this is talking about whatever it is, drugs, or this is not appropriate for a fourth grade. And take the What's Happening to Me books, which are perfect. Question about EMT, do you make them send it right in front of you? Yeah, I do. If they're going to do an e-transfer, they do it right there and then. And I have my cell phone with me, so I check and make sure that it's come through. I've never had anybody mess around with that. It's always been really straightforward. Again, issues with parents. So where you will get, at schools that have a particular demographic, like Catholic schools and Christian schools, they will vary, and each school will have a different culture. In some Catholic schools, it's fine to show the Facts of Life books, no problem at all. In others, you can't even show anything that depicts a naked human body, even if it's in cartoon form, like in Look Inside Your Body or whatever. Some Christian schools are perfectly happy to have things like ghost stories because they say their kids know fact from fiction, and that's all right. And in others, absolutely no, nothing that even mentions magic or anything like that. So whatever your personal views are, you've got to go along with what keeps the school happy. And so it's a good idea to check in advance what is acceptable and what is not, if you have any qualms at all about that. When you place the order, how do you go about getting the free books for the school? Do you leave this up to the library? Oh yeah, it's the librarian's choice, absolutely. I usually give her, well, she's got a catalogue, right? And I usually give her the current stock list and suggest that she just uses a text highlighter and highlights the stuff she wants on the stock list, or she can type up a spreadsheet and send it to me as an Excel file so that I can add it. Every time I do, you can tell by the fact that I'm going to be giving all this data to Val in spreadsheets, that I do up a sales spreadsheet for every book fair that I do, because I keep my records, and sometimes when you go back over them and look at what your top sellers really were, it's not what you thought they were, and that can help you to fine-tune your kit. And indeed that is one thing I totally forgot to address, doing book fairs by taking orders as opposed to selling from stock. I know some folks seem to think that I do all my book fairs from stock and cash and carry. That is not the case. It's about 50-50. I did 4 book fairs in the last 4 weeks. 2 were cash and carry and 2 were taking orders, because although I keep obscene amounts of stock. Even I don't keep enough to do 4 book fairs in a row, cash and carry. Kids do like instant gratification, and I only got into doing that at all because my last book fair of the year is always the first week of December, and it's always closing after the last orders deadline. And so I take every lick of stock I've got with me, and we do it cash and carry. And indeed, this year I've got if they don't come in until after Christmas. So yeah, you can do both. It's in some ways less work to do it cash and carry because you're not having to worry about what you're reordering and getting it in a hurry and so on. But either are fine, and I've done very good book fairs by taking orders. It doesn't make that much difference as long as you've explained exactly how it's working to the kids. No, there is no shipping charged at school book fairs. Sounds to me as if probably a few folks could probably do with reading through, and I'm going to put you on your honor to do this. Please read through the schools training package before getting certified by Val. Absolutely not. You don't. There is no shipping charged on school book fairs. In terms of if you're doing book fairs from stock, sometimes folks have worried about, well, I've got some of my stock from an exhibit order and I've got some from a school book fair. How do I keep my percentages straight? Actually, if you do the arithmetic, the difference in price between getting things on as a part of a school book fair and getting it as part of an exhibit order, it's minimal. Maybe 2 or 3% difference, that's all. And, given that there are loads of folks who are happy to use the Square and pay 3% processing when they haven't got free credits, I think it's within tolerances, let's put it that way, that I don't care whether my stock came from exhibits or school book fairs. If you think about it, school book fair and exhibits both are free shipping. Book fair, you're earning less commission. It's 16% rather than 22% on a school book fair, but it's 25% in free books. And of course, from your point of view, there's the volume. My last book fair was $5,000. So, I can manage to take a smaller cut of a larger sale, right? With an exhibit order, you're earning your full commission of 22%, but you're only getting 15% in free books. But you get customer specials on it as well. So by the time you've crunched the figures, there's not a whole lot of difference. If you're ordering $2,000 worth of books by either a school book fair or an exhibit order, there's not much difference in the percentages. But the key there is there's no shipping charged. Now, in terms of the librarian, yes, that's right, I was saying. So she can do it. One of the advantages of getting her to check things off, highlight things on the stock list, is that she can't then fixate on things that aren't in stock and that you can't supply. The stock list looks after you as long as you've made sure it's an up-to-date stock list. Sometimes they like to go onto the online catalogue and create a wish list on there. But and that also protects you from having them order things that you can't get. The danger is if they go through the paper catalogue, which they love to do, and they have all their post-it notes in, and they want this, this, and this, and it's out of stock. So sometimes if I haven't got another event coming up really quickly, I'll get them to go around and pick books from and just keep books. At the end of the fair, if there's stuff that's on their wish list that's sitting on the table, I get them to, we just check them off and supply them right there and then, because it's less to cart out to the car, which is always a wonderful thing. Now, what else is there in the questions? Let's see, I'm going back a few here. So anyway, the other thing about the free books to the school is that you have to order them at the same time as the main bulk of the order. There are times when you can give the librarian more time, because you could put it in as two book fairs, right? You could get all of the books for the kids and then a week or two later order the books for the librarian. But it has to have been a decent sized book fair to do that, because the two orders obviously have to add up to the same retail total. as if you'd put them in one order. But if you get, if you get some of the paid for books as free books on the first order, and then you get the librarian's books as paid for books on the second order, it's all going to work out and balance from the financial point of view. But let's see, it's got to be that the free book allowance must be over 650, because you have to be able to split it as $500 worth of paid for books, and what's a quarter of 500, 150. So it must be $650 total of free books due her. So you can put it as 500 paid for, 150 free. That may be too. Maybe I did that too quickly, and maybe that's not clear, in which case you're welcome to email me questions. But yeah, in general, better to get them focused and tell them that you need their free book order at the same time as the kids' orders, because you don't want to hold up the orders for the children. I Don't Carry Totally Lucy. It doesn't have inappropriate content for the correct age range. I think it's a lovely series, actually, but people tend to buy it for kids that are too young for it. Same as the growing up books. It's just that it's meant for kids who are beginning to go out to social events on their own, where they may be challenged by other kids drinking or taking drugs or whatever. And Lucy's a good kid, and she gets challenged with some difficult situations, and she has to think it through and decide what's the right way to behave, and she usually comes down on the right side. So it's a great thing. They're thought-provoking books and so on, but I wouldn't give them to anybody much younger than a teen, frankly. So no, I don't take those to school book fairs, because I don't need the aggravation of dealing with parents who suddenly decide, it's mentioning drugs. Oh, well, yeah, okay. If I do cash and carry, how many books do you take there? Oh, Lord, as many as I've got. I take everything, basically. I've got a Volvo estate, so I can get enough in the back to go and set up my book fair with all of my samples and with my racks and stuff like that. But if I'm then doing cash and carrying, it's going to be a decent sized book fair. I usually cart in, I'll go back, if it's a local school, I'll go in and deliver some more stock each day and tidy up halfway through the day and check that my books are still surviving and so on. So I'll keep taking more and more in. But if you're going to do a $5,000 book fair, which is certainly the top end of the, at the upper end of the range, you would want to be taking in probably $8,000 or $10,000 worth of books. What's more average would be, say, a $2,000 book fair. I'm always happy with a $2,000, but you'd still need $3,000 or $4,000 worth of stock to do that, because it's the same as with an exhibit. You know that if you're going to do a craft market or whatever, in order to sell $300 or $400 worth of books, you'd better have $1,000 or so there, because people need choice. They need to be able to see a range of things to find something they think would suit their kids. So yeah, cash and carry is not for everybody, and it's not necessary. I did a school book fair at the same time as I've got one consultant who lives very close to me, and she doesn't have a huge kit herself, so when she does a book fair, I usually have to supplement it for her. But she's super organized and super reliable, and she's just a gem, And so if I've got a surplus book fair, she'd be my first go-to person to help me with it. And she's now got one permanent school of her own as well. So I lend her books, but we're splitting our kit, right? So we each did a book fair at the same time in local Catholic schools that were more or less the same size and in similar communities. And I did cash and carry, and she did taking orders. We did almost exactly the same in sales. So if you choose to do cash and carry, it's for your own convenience. It's not something you've got to do. It really isn't. But you do need to have serious stock if you're going to do that. When you, once you've done your school certification, I'm being asked what you choose in Web Express to select the a book fair. That when you are qualified as an ES, you will get 3 new categories that you can select from. Where it normally would say direct sale, home party, exhibit order, it will then say also literacy fair, readathon, and school order. So literacy fair is usually what I should mention. Blinking readathons, shouldn't I? How about a minimum amount? I usually take around 200 to trade shows. I think I've covered that bit, that it should be about 200 different titles there for a school book fair. And I will send out that summary sheet that tells you what my top picks are for doing school book fairs. Readathons, I'm sorry, we're going on and on here. I should, you set me off and I'll talk forever. I'm bad. Sometimes I just need to have the plug pulled. But I will briefly just touch on readathons. I've already said what I think the disadvantages to a readathon, but obviously, if you do a really good readathon, I've heard of amounts like $5,000 or $6,000 in funds being raised. Usually, they split the books between. Theoretically, what should happen is that the school gets 50% of the funds raised for spending on books for themselves, and then the kids get 50% of whatever they've collected to spend on books for themselves. I usually combine it with something that looks more or less like a school book fair, so that the kids can come in and spend their money on samples so they can see what I'm offering. Okay, there are some issues that you have to deal with there. You're very dependent on the school volunteer coordinator or whoever, because there's a lot of money being. Oh, somebody's knocking the door. Just a second, David.
I can't.
Oh, well.
Rachel's here.
Okay, somebody's going to go and answer the door. I don't know who's at the door at this time of night, for sure. Yes, issues when you're doing. When people are collecting, when a lot of money is being collected, then you want to have accountability on both sides. So I usually do the counting of the funds when they come in, along with a school volunteer of some description, so that she can see that I'm accurately and honestly handling the funds, and the same, where each other's cross-check. And they may or may not be efficient about that sort of thing. And I've had problems communicating with them and getting them to G up and close things and so on. So you want to be very organized and very, have all your ducks in a row for a readathon. The person to ask about readathons, the one who's probably done more than anybody else, is Lucy-Ann Stoop. And she's my go-to person if I'm looking to get, if you really want to know about readathons, maybe she'll come and do a Zoom for you and tell you all about readathons. The fact that I don't do them, I think, tells you what I like best.
That's okay. Don't feel like you need to go into.
Oh, right. Okay. Raylan's going to take care of her twins. And I think, how long have I been an Usborne consultant? Oh, I'm older than dirt, dear. 22 years. I don't think there are many people around who've been. Who else has been as long as me? Well, obviously Karen Powell, Aloha Johnson, Kathy Russell, who isn't very active anymore. Cindy Marr. Cindy Marr was my very first recruit and my very first supervisor that I promoted out, and she's been doing it for 22 years as well. I think that's about it in terms of who's still. It's staying power. 22 years, and I still love doing it. I love being my own boss. I really enjoy the people that I work with, and I wouldn't still be doing it if I weren't still having fun. I still love kids' books. I love talking about them, and I think that with a lot of people, if the biggest bit of advice I can give is just to have a bit of staying power and keep going at it. If you can last it out and not give in at the first, the first obstacles, and just keep going so that you're learning. It's fine to make mistakes, because mistakes are largely a learning opportunity. I've made every mistake in the book, and that's why I know a lot, because I learn from my mistakes. So trust me, you're unlikely to do anything dumber than me. Just take a chance, get out there and try things and see what works for you, you know? I think that's it. Is that a wrap, Val?